You can use the Enumeration Set option within the library to create a set of named constants that you would use wherever you need to have some kind of uniformity as attribute values. So let me give you an example. This vendor option right here, this vendor attribute, normally you would have a finite set of vendors, maybe 4 or 5 common vendors. But unfortunately, the different operating areas and maybe even people within the same operating area, they may call these vendors different names. You see this all the time in big systems like this that span an organization. One group calls them Acme, another group calls them Acme Instruments, another calls them AI. And you don't want that. You don't want a system that's got the capability to do searches and sorts and retrievals based on strings to have a bunch of non-standard strings out there. So we have a construct that we call an enumeration set. And again, the first thing to know about the word enumeration set is just a fancy word for saying a list. It's just a list of allowable values. And in this case, that list is something that you can then exploit when you define the value type. So we have strings, integers, reals, etc., plus whatever you create as enumeration sets. So then that becomes selectable from a drop-down here. Let me demonstrate. It's a lot easier to demonstrate. So I'll go ahead and create an enumeration set for just that instance, for when we have that vendor field. So in this case, I'll start with it's going to be an enumeration set that I'm going to call vendors. And let's be a little more specific. We probably have a lot of vendors. How about vendors of tanks? And this is going to be a list of valid tank vendors for purposes of uniformity. You want this to be uniform across the organization. And also, you'll notice that there's some economies of scale in when you've got tens of thousands of entries. It's much better to make reference to items in a list than to have to represent these attributes as strings everywhere. So I'll go ahead and start by just giving it a value, and I'm just going to increment 1 through X. The name here is going to be Acme, and let's say this is Acme Instruments. And our next item, let's just go through the list here. Okay, I'm finishing up my list. And so this list now, which I've incremented from 1 to 4, we can use really any numbers that we want here. We can actually use numbers starting at 1 or starting in any offset, and you can even express this in hexadecimal if you prefer. And that actually may have some implications on storage later if you've got a very, very large list. See, what we're doing here is we're not only creating a list of the official way to write this up in an attribute, but we're also making it more economical to store this, because instead of having to store, what is this? This is 7 digits here. Instead of having to store a 7-digit or 7-character string, you only have to store a value, a single value. So it ends up being more efficient. So how can I make use of this? Well, the best place to make use of this is in your definitions of element templates. So this is another example of where using templates can end up saving you a great deal of time and making things more uniform. Normally, previously, my vendor field here in the mixing tank template, the vendor field was simply a string. But look at what I can do now that I've got that new enumeration set. I can modify this and say, no, this is not a string. This is going to be one of the items in that enumeration set of vendors tanks. And we can even give it a default value if we choose to. As you can see, you can choose from the vendors tanks there list. I'm not going to give that a default. Don't think it's a good idea to put a default value in there. And now that I've created that, remember that's just for the mixing tank. If I go back into my list of elements, you'll notice all these mixing tanks. I've got 2 of them here. These mixing tanks now, well, they're going to show me an error first of all, because as you can see, it doesn't match what I've now defined as the element. So I need to go in here and modify this. Yeah, let me just go ahead and cancel out of that. I just wanted to do something that would edit this. There we go. And now I'm going to specify this is Acme. So why did we do that? Why did we go to all this trouble? Well, now there's only one way to spell Acme. You don't have to worry about different people spelling it different ways. Some people calling it Acme Instrumentation, somebody calling it AI for short. All this stuff is stuff that you can control. There we go. So here's my other mixing tank. If this is the same vendor, I choose it, or I choose a different vendor as is required. So there we go. So that's the effect of this enumeration set. It gives us a kind of a standardized way of making reference to this. So if you look at before and after, look at the mixing tank versus the storage tank. Storage tank is still an open string. Mixing tank is more uniform than that. And to give you an example, this is what you might see after 10 years of working with this system. Half of your elements refer to them that way, the other half refer to them this way, and you get all kinds of inconsistencies. So of course the power of this is that day 10 years from now when Acme Instruments says, oh, by the way, we've got a recall on all these tanks. Let us know what your inventory is. You can easily go out and search for things that are uniform instead of having to guess what somebody might have called this. See, with the enumeration set, you've got a standard mechanism. You don't have to worry about that. Now that's just, of course, the tip of the iceberg because it's just describing one attribute, but you can apply this to any attribute by adding these enumeration sets. Now, if for any reason you decide you need to renumber these, that is an option that's available. Just select the first element in that enumeration set, choose to renumber, and then you can specify a different starting value. For example, if you've got a slightly different lookup that you'd like to accomplish programmatically, then you can specify this to have a different set of initial values here.